What's up, Internet? Today we're going to change the oil on this 2007 RMZ450, and I call out the model year specifically because if you've been around long enough, you know, or you should know, that in 2008 the RMZ was a brand new generation. It was a new frame, it had fuel injection, new engine, new cases. It was just a very new, almost from the ground up motorcycle for Suzuki. Unfortunately, they're still using the same generation today, I believe. I mean, that's why we call Ken Roxon Kickstart Kenny. Feel bad for the guy. First thing you're gonna wanna do is get the engine nice and hot. We've already done that, and we just put it on the lift, and we're getting ready to actually pop the drain bolt and change the oil. But first, a little pro tip. These 450s, and I think this goes for all 450s, they run really, really hot, okay? They have higher compression ratios than my YZ250 two-stroke, and you can't let them idle for too long. Basically what I do is you got an overflow drain here for your coolant. Once I see a couple of drops coming out of that, shut her off. She is plenty hot at that point. If you let it keep running, eventually it'll just overflow and you'll just see a pool of coolant underneath the bike, and you don't want to do that. As you sit on the bike, on the left-hand side, we've got two bolts, one here, one here. The one to the left is your oil drain bolt. The one in the center here is an oil strainer. Plus we've got an oil filter on the other side of the bike. Here's your oil filter, and it's got a nice convenient fill limit, capacity limit written right on the cover of the oil filter. So let's go back to the other side and get started draining the oil out of the engine. So in this instance, the actual strainer piece, which just sits in that bolt, it didn't come out with the bolt, in which case I just reached in with some small needle nose pliers and pulled it out. Pay attention to which end comes out first so that you put it back in the same order. I don't know if that matters or not, but just in case I did it that way. So I just put it back into the bolt so that the bolt and the strainer are back to like one piece. This strainer actually looks really, really good. It doesn't have any little bits of metal or anything. I also found it useful to have a magnet to actually grab the bolts. It's just kind of tight in there, the way that the bolts go in sideways and you've got the frame. So this came in handy as well. Next, we're going to remove the oil filter cover and replace the filter. This particular make and model has Allen heads, so I've got a socket here and a ratchet. You got to be careful not to put too much torque on these. These are pretty small bolts, so I'm not sure what the torque spec is. I would imagine it's probably less than 10 foot-pounds, but I don't know. I don't have the manual, and I didn't really want to take the time to look it up. Just know that you really don't need to torque these down, and they're different sizes. So long one goes on the bottom, short one goes on the top. If this thing gets stubborn, what you can do is grab the cover by the ends and kind of just twist back and forth rather than taking a screwdriver and trying to pry in between the edges, because you might muck up the surface. And see, that works. There is a spring on the inside of the cover. It sits on there like so, and you have an O-ring right here. I'm not going to replace the O-ring this time around. And sometimes these are a little bugger to get out as well. Man, I do not miss my 450. So again, we've got our needle nose pliers, and this one came out super, super easy. And again, always note when they come out which end is which. On the inside end, you've got this little rubber grommet, and then the outside has a recessed area that the spring sits in. So we're just gonna clean this up a little bit, go get the new oil filter, and start reversing the process. Okay, one real quick tip. This, because it has a spring, there's a little bit of force pushing back on you. You want to make sure that once you start getting these close to the point where they're starting to snug up, alternate like half turns on each one so that the cover is actually pressing up against the case, nice and smooth and even. Also, you'll notice that usually on these I would use like a T-handle, but since they're Allen heads and not regular hex heads, I'm using my ratchet, but you can very easily put too much pressure, too much torque. So one thing you can do is kind of choke the wrench, hold it at the top, and just don't put a lot of pressure on these because they don't need it. Okay, we've got our drain bolts and the strainer bolt and then the other drain bolt. We've got both of those back in. We're ready to put new oil back into the engine case. So your oil filler is right here. Little trick. These adjustable crescent wrenches are perfect for taking off your filler caps. All you got to do, squeeze that there and then bust her loose. Rather than using like pliers, which the teeth, the jaws of the pliers, regardless of what kind of pliers they are, tend to chew up the filler caps. So it's kind of nice to use a crescent wrench because it doesn't leave a mark on there. One thing that's kind of cool is all your oil related bolts are hexes on here. So you got two for the oil filter. You saw that earlier. There's one down here. That's your oil level check bolt. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill her up, pull the check bolt, and make sure that we've got oil up to the check bolt. Then we'll run the engine. You don't need to let it get super hot. You just need to run it for 30 seconds, a minute, let the oil circulate in the engine, and then we'll check the check bolt again. Probably have to top off a little bit more fluid in there. You can choose to just go 1,300 milliliters and just fill it, and it'll be what it is, but you still want to check the check bolt. And if it's over full, you're going to have to drain some out, and that kind of sucks. So I prefer to just fill it to the check bolt, run the engine, let the oil circulate, let it sit for a minute, check the check bolt again, and then top it off if you have to. Super easy job. You don't need a bike lift to change the oil on the RMZ or any bike for that matter, but it sure does make it nice if you do have one. If you have one, you probably don't need half of the information I've provided you in this video because you probably have experience and you already know. But a couple of key points if this is your first time or something you haven't done in a very long time or you haven't done much of, get the bike warmed up. Again, with these 4-stroke motocross bikes, there's no fan. You can't let them sit there and idle forever. They will boil over very quickly. Once you see a couple of drops coming out of your your overflow tube, shut it down. It's hot enough. Drain. You got your oil strainer. Clean that up if you have any metal bits in there. This one was incredibly clean. And then you've got your drain bolt. And then on the other side, you've got your oil filter cover. Again, sometimes those can get stuck. They're pretty tight. Grab the top and the lower bolt holes and just twist it counterclockwise and clockwise. Just go back and forth. Be careful of that spring and that tension. It pops off as you saw in the video earlier. Let's see what else. You've got your oil drain check bolt, right? Your oil level check bolt. So for me, I pop that off. I fill. Once I start to see oil coming out of that, you plug it, run the engine. You don't need to let it get hot, but just run it for a minute or so, let the oil circulate, pop the check bolt off again, and then let it sit for a minute, top off as needed. I used 1040 Spectra, I think is what I used on this one. It's like a semi-synthetic. If you're running in really hot climates or really cold climates, you might want to run something other than 1040, but 1040 is a good all-around weight oil for most climates. If you are nervous about not knowing what the torque specs are, sorry I can't give you those. I didn't really want to spend too much time looking them up. I don't have the service manual, but what you can do is go down to your local dealership and just ask them. If they sell Suzukis, they should be able to look up the torque specs for you. They'll have the part numbers for your oil filter, all that stuff. So you probably got to go down there to get oil in the filter anyway, so you can just ask them while you're there. They can give you torque specs for bolts. I think that is it. So you know what to do, man. Keep the rubber side down. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.